You know, it's already May of 2022, and boy, does the time fly nowadays, doesn't it? I remember it was just January yesterday. But, anyways, what I want to talk about here today is Attack of the Clones, Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones. This movie, this week, turned 20 years old. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this movie, specifically why, is because, well, it's been 20 years, and I think it was a pretty big movie when it came out. But there's a lot of things about the movie that I find interesting. So this is going to be kind of like a retrospective on Episode 2 Attack of the Clones. So I find it funny that for a very long time, Star Wars Episode 2 was like the most hated Star Wars movie. People criticized the acting quite a bit and the script. This was also the first film to use like 100%, maybe not 100, I think it was like 90% digital technology, and it was shot on digital, not on film. That makes it different from Phantom Menace. And so because of that, Phantom Menace feels like more of an actual film, and this one's more, it doesn't even use film, it's digital. So it was sort of a thing where George Lucas was kind of ahead of the time, as he always is, because he wanted to shoot things on digital, because when you shoot things on digital, you can edit it right away because it's already shot. Like, you don't have to wait to, take the footage and run it through the machines and get it cut up. Like, he was able to edit everything, as he was going along with it. And that needed to be important because the movie Attack of the Clones was the beginning of the Clone War. So you're going to have, like, big Clone War battles. We saw one at the end of Attack of the Clones. And so it became a very controversial point of contention, and it still is to this day. A lot of the hardcore, like, film nerds, like people like J.J. Abrams, and who doesn't get a lot of love on Star Wars nowadays, but you know what I mean. He's still a film nerd. And guys like Christopher Nolan, Quentin Tarantino, they will always shoot their movies on film. It's a traditional way to do it. And even though Lucas predates all these guys by many years, Lucas went to film school with, Spielberg and Francis Ford Coppola, and those guys are all boys. They all graduated from that same class. He decided to try the digital thing because maybe it was easier to produce the Star Wars movie and easier to really make the special effects the way he wanted them. Now, unfortunately, that leads to another problem with this film, and that is the fact that, yes, it may have been easy to shoot, but the movie also looks very dated. Technology has advanced quite a bit in 20 years, y'all. I mean, Attack of the Clones, the final sequence in this film with the clones against the droids looks like a PlayStation 2 game. It is not a very good looking scene. Even if you have the movie in 4K or whatever, it doesn't matter because it was shot on digital, so it's not going to improve the quality of that. It just does not look very good. And the other big criticism was, of course, the dialogue and the acting of the romance stuff. Those seem to be the two big issues that people had with this movie. Now, it's either Attack of the Clones or Phantom Menace as far as what many considered the worst Star Wars movie. But what I find funny is that, like I said, either Episode 2 or Episode 1, I think Episode 2 was probably the most hated Star Wars movie until the sequel trilogy, until The Last Jedi. Because even with Phantom Menace, there were fans that didn't like it, but they were still on board to see where it was going. But after The Last Jedi and the choices that were made there, everything kind of, that was it. And that wound up being the most hated Star Wars movie when it came out. And when the sequel trilogy was done, there was all of a sudden this group of people that got bigger and bigger that started to show appreciation for the prequel trilogy again, which for a long time was laughed at, When we look at the actual movie, though, there's a lot of good things about this film. There's a lot of things about this movie I really like. And I already mentioned what I don't like. I do think that the digital look does not age very well. I didn't even like the way it looked back then. And I do think the movie's a little bit bloated. And the acting in the love scenes aren't that good. But let's talk about what is good about Attack of the Clones. So there's a couple things. First of all, I really like the Obi-Wan mission. Obi-Wan trying to find who the bounty hunter is that was hired to kill Padme. Like, I like that storyline a lot. I like that, it became sort of this mystery. he goes to Camino, and we get our first look at the Kaminoans, and that's cool. Later on, he goes to Geonosis. Meanwhile, Anakin goes to Naboo and then back to Tatooine. And so you have Anakin and Obi-Wan, who are the two main characters, going on their separate missions, then coming back together in the third act. Classic writing. But I do like Obi-Wan sort of trying to figure out what's going on, going back to the Jedi Temple, discovering that the planet where the clones were commissioned was broken. It was broken out of the Jedi Archives. Someone deleted it from the Jedi Archives. And he has to figure out who it was, and it turned out to be, Jedi Master Sifo Dyas, which in one of the earlier versions of the film was supposed to be Sido Dyas, like Sidious. Sido Dyas, Sid Dyas, that was the original thing that he used a fake name to get in there. But it was changed to Jedi Master Sifo Dyas because I guess that Lucas had an idea for Episode 3 that never happened, because before Episode 3 came out, he was being asked, by everyone, who is Sifo Dyas and what's the story with that? And he said, I'll reveal it in Episode 3. I vividly remember this interview. And then when Episode 3 came out, Revenge of the Sith, it didn't reveal anything. We had to wait for the Clone Wars show to get to that part of the series to really reveal that. There was some books that talked about it, but when it comes to visual media that you don't have to read, like TV movies, it wasn't really answered until the Clone Wars. And that's one big aspect of the film that I do like I mentioned, is Obi-Wan trying to figure out what's going on. He runs into Jango Fett, they have a fight or whatever. Tamora Morrison debuting for Star Wars in this film and sticking around for a long time because he voices all of the clones in all of the shows. And that's a lot of characters. And he recently played himself, well, not himself, he played Boba Fett in the Book of Boba Fett series. And before that, The Mandalorian Season 2. So he's a pretty great character here. I do enjoy, most of that fight they had on Camino. They had that space fight, too, with the asteroids, which was kind of cool, the way that Lucas played with sound there. But I do like the fight, because basically Jango wins that fight, Jango does have a W over Obi-Wan in that fight. Jango was played up to be a real deal, which is why you can understand that the clone troopers were supposed to be modeled after him because of how awesome he was. And so he ends up discovering that the bounty hunter Jango Fett is the guy used to create the clone army from the Empire. And this is before the Separatist movement even had really started. So it's suspicious that the Empire's already got an army to protect them from the Separatists when they weren't even a thing. But I guess the Empire kind of felt like they wanted to have an army anyways. Of course, we found out in Episode 3 what their true nature was, but we weren't supposed to know that back then. So while Obi-Wan is doing this investigation, Anakin's getting closer and closer to Padme, which leads him to Tatooine, where he witnesses the death of his mother. And that begins his descent into madness. And Hayden Christensen, he was better in Episode 3. In this movie, the scene where he's like, Obi-Wan's holding me back. He sounds like some whiner in this movie, People thought he whined in the next one more, but really it was this one that he became more of a whiner. I mean, there's that famous scene in this film where he's telling Padme that he killed and murdered a whole village of sand people, of Tusken Raiders, and her response is, oh, we all get angry sometimes. And I always laugh at that scene because it's you're supposed to be hooking up with this dude and you just witness him murdering an entire village and you're okay with that. You're okay with marrying him. See how it's dumb, bro. There's some dumb things in this film, and that's why it's not a very well-liked movie. Now, I still think this movie sticks to Star Wars a lot better than The Last Jedi does, and it's definitely not as bad as Last Jedi in my opinion, although Last Jedi, I feel, does have probably better acting, better effects, even though it came out way later, and better sound engineering. Music-wise, John Williams, I prefer this score of Episode 2 over Episode 8, because it does have that love theme. We heard that everywhere back in 2002 when they were hyping up this movie. It was on every trailer. And that song kind of grew on me. I like that song, little jingle. So then we have, of course, the big Coliseum battle at the end of the film, where we finally get to see, Mace Windu in action with the purple lightsaber just being a badass. And on top of that, this movie also introduces to the universe the character of Count Dooku, played by Christopher Lee. And it was so good to have Christopher Lee, a seasoned actor, in these movies. Why? I mean, they're all the actors in this movie are all seasoned to a degree. But Christopher Lee predates all of them, you know what I mean? And that's why I kind of like him, sort of like what they did with Alec Guinness in the original Star Wars movies, like that veteran actor who's been around for like forever, like that old school actor. And that's who Christopher Lee is. And he brings that awesome voice and the way he carries himself. He brings that charisma to that role. Count Dooku is super confident, yo. And you can feel it because freaking Christopher Lee is confident. And he played that character great. I mean, he's like really the foil of the film. And I do love that scene with him and bouncing off of McGregor, Ewan McGregor, when he's got him, like when he's got Obi-Wan trapped and he reveals to him. He basically tells him the truth. He's like the Republic's under the control of a Sith Lord named Darth Sidious, and he doesn't want to believe him. But it's just kind of funny that the villains right there are not only betraying each other, but literally telling the good guy what their plan is. Not entirely, but most of it. And you have hints earlier in the film from Django about somebody named Tyrannus, and you don't know who that is until the final scene of the film, or one of the final scenes where Dooku lands on that ship, or leaves on his ship to go to Coruscant and meets with the Emperor, who wasn't the Emperor yet, just Palpatine, the Darth Sidious, and that's when he says, Lord Tyrannus. So it's like, okay, this is all a big conspiracy, a big plan, and I love it. I actually really love the rise of Palpatine in these three movies. That's like my favorite part about the prequels is Palpatine's rise to power. The fights with the Jedi though were pretty cool. I think maybe they looked a little bit too weak at times, but the main players like Dooku and Obi-Wan and Anakin looked great. Like I mentioned before, the effects do age pretty badly, but the actual action content was a lot of fun. And seeing the Jedi kick ass is something that we've been wanting to see for decades, and we finally got to see it here. And then we had the final lightsaber duel, which it's probably the weakest one of the prequel trilogy, but I think it's also a bit underrated. You know what I mean? I actually kind of like Anakin versus Dooku. Like, people say that the fight's just like, they're twirling lights in the dark, and I kind of like that effect. It does look a little silly, the way they have their swords, like, above their heads like that. It's a little silly, but I like how the light, like, there's no light in the room, and then they're doing their duel, and freaking Dooku slices off Anakin's arm and knocks him away. Like, boom, you're a rookie. But that's very much like what happened to Luke in Episode 5, because like Lucas said, they rhyme like poetry. So then Yoda steps in. Now, this is controversial because Yoda getting into a lightsaber duel for the first time got an uproarious reaction in movie theaters all across the country. People have been wanting to see that for years, and they got to see it. But looking back on it now, it's kind of a ridiculous scene. And I felt this way even like 10 years ago. Like when the movie first came out, like I dug it. But then after I saw it a few more times, Yoda like flipping and screaming and growling, jumping off the walls, not really that scary at all. Like I thought he was quick and it was well done in that aspect, but it becomes a stalemate really. And you would think that Yoda would be able to kick his ass pretty easily, but Yoda's definitely holding back. He has to be because Dooku survives. However, with that being said, I'm not a big fan of this fight, but the next time we see Yoda fight with a lightsaber would be against Palpatine, at least with a duel anyways, would be against Palpatine in Episode 3, and I thought that was great. That was a much better freaking fight than this one. In many ways, Attack of the Clones is like, really, to me, it's kind of like an appetizer for Revenge of the Sith, because Revenge of the Sith was the real main event of the prequels. That's the real, like, finale. That was the great movie that we were waiting for. And Episode 2 is kind of like an appetizer. Like, I don't think Episode 2 is as good as Empire Strikes Back by any means. I mean, that's I don't know who would think that, but I guess someone out there does. This is someone's favorite movie. But it is my least favorite of the original 6. Some would say Phantom Menace, but for me personally, Phantom Menace, there is one long, boring part in Phantom Menace, and Attack of the Clones, doesn't really have that, but this movie, I think, can be saved with some editing, and I'll tell you what I think. I think if you remove the droid factory scene, which I think is the most pointless and boring sequence in the whole movie, it's not exciting at all, like, it looks fake, it doesn't do it for me. It's not a good sequence. Remove that, or at least shorten it big time. then take the deleted scenes from episode 2, which would be all the scenes of Padme showing Anakin like her home and her past, and put those back in the movie, it's a better movie. And I honestly feel that way. It's a much, much better movie. Because, like, the big complaint about the romance is that they fell in love a little too quickly. Like, it kind of didn't make any sense as to how they were able to fall in love that fast. Just from hanging out a couple days. But at the same time, if you show, like, those scenes of Padme, if you haven't seen it yet, get yourself a copy of the Attack of the Clones DVD. It's probably easy to find. And then it's in the extras. The scenes of Padme, like, showing Anakin her home and her family, I think those are way more important than anything else, because it shows that the romance kind of blossoms slowly with him getting to know her and her showing him around, and it's a lot more realistic, you know what I mean? Them spending more time together and actually getting personal, as opposed to just rolling around in a meadow and they make out, you know, or whatever. Like, it's just, you know, there's a lot of things to laugh at about this movie, yo. Like, she's telling Anakin, like, you know, we can't be together. Meanwhile, she's dressed in this sexy, tight-ass leather outfit. Natalie Portman is, like, super hot in this freaking movie. Like, there's so many things to laugh at and to meme at with this film, but it was a big deal when it came out. Maybe not as big of a deal as Phantom Menace. That was, like, you know, 16 years of waiting. And episode 3, of course, was the big finale. This was the movie sandwich in the middle, which some would say is the most important movie. Some would say that the second film of a trilogy is the most important, and I can understand why. Because, you know, you got the sandwich, you know, the two pieces of bread that hold the meat together, but the meat's important. And, you know, this is not my favorite middle of a trilogy film, by any means. And it's my least favorite of the original Star Wars movies before Disney came in. You know, and I'm not counting the Ewok movies. I'm talking about the ones that were actually done, like, you know, actual theatrical Star Wars films, like actual ones that are numbered. This is my least favorite, but that doesn't mean there's not things I don't like about it. And there's tons I like about it. But it is fun to revisit. I just always fast forward that damn Droid Factory scene, bro. It's so bad. It's like a bad video game. Anyways, what do you think about Attack of the Clones? Let me know. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to y'all soon.